Major funding for this program has been provided by the Letty Pate Evans Foundation and by the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Georgia Humanities Council. Additional funding was provided by the David, Helen, and Marion Woodward Fund, a Wachovia Bank-managed foundation, by Atlanta Gas Light Company, Georgia's largest energy distributor and Atlanta's oldest corporate citizen, and by the American Express Philanthropic Fund.
Seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Beautiful. Very smooth. Very quiet ride. There's that much crater on there.
Thousand feet high, 80 feet per second vertical rise.
Eagle Houston, you're looking good at 2. Ping, zags, and midspin all agree. I'm going right down US 1. Eagle Houston, going right down the track. Everything's great. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Heroism assumes many forms. Morning.
Morning.
When man first set foot on the moon in 1969, the Peachtree Plaza Hotel was but a twinkle in the eye of architect John Portman. But Atlanta stood on the verge of a building boom that would transform its skyline from a cluster of 10 to 25-story office towers near 5 Points to this, a linear chain of skyscrapers, some over 60 stories tall, stretching from 5 Points to Buckhead and beyond.
The sharp contrast between the skylines of the 1940s and the 1990s symbolizes the explosion of the central city. But the buildings don't tell the whole story. As Atlanta leapfrogged from the 22nd largest city in the country in 1940 to the 12th largest today, some dramatic transformations accompanied that growth. There were often conflicts between city and suburbs, blacks and whites, developers and preservationists. This is the story of how modern downtown Atlanta evolved into something so enigmatic that different observers could describe it as characterless and without charm.
The place Southerners hope to go when they die.
A pearl in the sea of grits.
For Atlanta in the World War II era, this central city was a vibrant town center where offices and loft manufacturing coexisted, where department and specialty stores attracted customers by trolley and automobile from outlying areas, where movie houses and restaurants offered leisure opportunities, but also where the carefully constructed color line regulated and segregated the behavior of black and white citizens. Peachtree Street and Auburn Avenue were mirror images of each other, each having retail, office, and entertainment establishments. What divided them was a color line. Auburn Avenue served black Atlantans, while Peachtree Street was for whites.
The making of modern Atlanta was not just about the building up of skylines. It was also about the tearing down of the color line. What had been part of everyday life downtown, the separation of the races, disappeared. Separate water fountains and restrooms, nosebleed sections in theater balconies, separate seating in the back of buses ceased to be part of everyday life for black Atlantans. All this happened throughout the South, of course, but in Atlanta less violently. Modern Atlanta grew in large part by dismantling its color line.
The historic buildings on Atlanta's two main streets are now dwarfed by its post-war skyline. Along Peachtree Street today, the William Oliver Building, the Flatiron Building, the Candler Building, the Rhodes Haverty Building, Macy's Department Store, and the Capital City Club stand as stately reminders of an earlier era. Along Auburn Avenue, the Rucker, Herndon, Oddfellows, and Prince Hall buildings endure. Between 1940 and 1990, Peachtree Street was transformed from a main street where Atlantans came to shop, work, and be entertained, to a strip where fewer Atlantans and more conventioneers came to work and play. Meanwhile, Peachtree's mirror image across the old color line, Auburn Avenue, slowly declined.
How did all this happen? What's the key to understanding this transformation? Well, here's one of them. See you later in the show. Automobiles had already begun reshaping downtown earlier in the century. Viaducts built in the 1920s over the railroad tracks in the heart of historic Atlanta had reunited the northern and southern halves of downtown, made the entire area accessible by automobile, and in the process created what's now underground. In post-war Atlanta, planners and promoters championed expressway construction to give suburbanites easy access to the downtown. Enter the law of unintended consequences. What had been planned as a way in for suburbanites served also as a way out.
We really did not dream or fully understand what the implications of what we were doing, either the scale or the form in which this new technology and facility would have. We thought we were going to always have a downtown area, that people in outlying areas were going to drive downtown to work and to shop and to be entertained. We have since understood over the last 40 years the full nature of the implications of what we did, and that is that the highways draw people out to new territories, that people having more leisure time shop on the weekends, that the workplace begins to scatter to go to where the people are and where the shopping then ends up, so that we began to scatter our population in a form which we now call suburbia.
Atlanta's central business district certainly didn't allow progress to leave it in the dust. Interstates 20, 75, and 85, which were completed in the 60s and widened in the 80s, came together downtown. MARTA, the mass transit system, came online in the 70s. The expressways and MARTA enhanced the location of the stadium and the Omni, bringing sports fans from around the metropolitan area to downtown. After that, it made sense to project the Georgia Dome and most of the venues for the 1996 Olympics for the downtown as well. Glass boxes kept springing up, even though office space was being built faster in the suburbs. Hotels became a central feature, catering to a growing convention trade. But for modern Atlanta, downtown was not the center of the metro area. It had to compete with Cumberland, Perimeter, Southlake, and other suburban villages built around regional shopping malls. Downtown changed with the times.
Oh, Peachtree's a street that is noble and fine, a street no Atlantan could ever malign. We're used to the racket, we're used to the din. They are tearing up Peachtree again. They're tearing up Peachtree again. When Judgment Day comes, and they say that it will, the angels will sing, and the earth will stand still. The heavens will ring with a thunderous amen. Then they'll go back to tearing up Peachtree again. They'll be tearing up Peachtree again.
The reshaping of the downtown didn't begin in earnest until the mid-1950s with the construction of the Fulton National Bank building, the first significant contribution to Atlanta's skyline since the start of the Great Depression in 1929. The building boom of the 1960s reached its zenith with the development of Peachtree Center. Glass and steel towers designed by John Portman and others began to replace the brick, stone, and terracotta skyscrapers of an earlier era.
I decided to do a master plan in the central city over many blocks, which we did not own, we did not control, we had no access to. But to begin to think in terms of restructuring the central city in a way that relates to people and not to things. Put people first and things second. I mean, that's so fundamental, you'd think that, you know, everybody thought that way, but as a matter of fact, very few people think that way. So it was from that basic, very simplistic position that the whole evolution and the beginning of what is now Peachtree Center evolved.
The rebuilding of the downtown took place on both sides of the color line. In the late 1940s, a new commercial center along Hunter Street corridor, now Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, heralded the post-war revival of black enterprise. The mid-1960s saw construction of Citizens Trust Bank on Piedmont Avenue. Its location away from Auburn Avenue signaled the exodus of black professionals from their previous offices in the Rucker, Herndon, and Oddfellows buildings. The decline of business on Auburn Avenue was due in part to the breaking of the color line.
We had a lot of discussions on the question of where the expressway should go down the east side of town.
George Goodwin was a City Hall reporter and then executive director of the Central Atlanta Improvement Association in the early 1950s.
And somebody had suggested that if you bowed it out, the curves wouldn't be as sharp, and also you'd have more land left inside downtown Atlanta, because it was sure going to prove to be a barrier wherever it was built over there on the east side, just like the railroads were on the south, and the Interstate 20 eventually would be, I mean, the railroads on the west and Interstate 20 on the south. And so there was quite a discussion in the association of that. John O. Childs was a real estate man, very close friend of the mayor, listened to all the discussion and finally said, well, fellas, I'll tell you. The difference of whether you're outside that expressway curve or inside that expressway curve is going to be the difference between chicken salad.
Plans to rebuild downtown Atlanta in the 1950s included racial barriers cast literally in concrete. But when black Atlantans discovered that the downtown connector was aligned to cut off Auburn Avenue from the central city, they were outraged. By standing resolute in protest, they saw to it that the expressway was shifted 3 blocks to the west.
Don't hang around and let your problems surround you. There are movie shows downtown. Maybe you know some little places to go to where they never close. Downtown, just listen to the rhythm of a gentle bossa nova.
By the mid-1960s, downtown became the focus of a final attack on the color line by black Atlantans. They protested Jim Crow laws by sitting in at Rich's Magnolia Room and Leb's Deli. They marched through downtown to the state capitol and City Hall.
Where all the lights are bright downtown, waiting for you tonight downtown. You're gonna be all right now.
The civil rights movement opened downtown to all Atlantans, black as well as white. But again, unintended consequences. With the end of legal segregation and the movement of black Atlantans to the west side, the demand for office and retail space along the avenue diminished. Sweet Auburn lost its luster.
The goal of the planning and urban designs for the area is to preserve the unique spirit which was most evident in the area from the early 1900s to the 1950s.
Plans to revitalize the avenue were announced as early as 1975. But this first plan and a series of ambitious schemes that followed never advanced beyond the proposal stages. In 1991, a new plan was announced, one that paired the revitalization of Auburn Avenue with the redesign of Peachtree Street.
One of the major recommendations of that Central Area Study, too, was that we go back and really redesign Peachtree Street and Auburn Avenue, our two really main streets in the community, and give them the kind of treatment they deserve, which will sort of be our front door and be the place that people will instantly recognize as the heart and soul of the Central City.
I think there's a great deal of potential for Auburn Avenue, as we've discussed earlier, and I'm hopeful that the 1991 plan will actually make a difference, and we'll begin to see some meaningful development along Auburn Avenue. However, at the same time, I'm not optimistic, just because of the way Atlanta has dealt with development in the past. There is not a premium placed on preserving our history, those things that were significant in bringing us to the point where we are. Instead, there's much more emphasis on high-rise buildings and high-tech development rather than trying to bring some marriage of the two together and really creating a livable and cohesive environment.
But the mindset generally was we have lagged behind investment. Now it's our turn in the Sun Belt to get it, and let's make hay while our sun is shining, or the sun is shining on the Sun Belt. And so we sort of turned our back and ignored those things that we did have that should be preserved. And you know, I was involved in a lot of those battles. I think I was unjustly treated by the preservationists because who considered me the tool of the developers and the business community. And that really was not the case.
Those Olympics are the reason, so before they dig a Peachtree, we suggest that you go to the city fathers and say, whoa! Take those hookers from the park and put East Point in the dark. But please, don't monkey with Peachtree. Move Grant Park to Lenox Square. Get that dome up in the air. But please, please, I beg on my knees, don't monkey with old Peachtree.
As we said in the opening program of this series, Atlantans believe that nostalgia should advance commerce, not stand in its way. Historic preservation is not our city's strong point. The name Peachtree is so indelibly linked to the mythic, romantic image of Atlanta, Gone with the Wind and all that every developer wants to be able to sell a fashionable Peachtree Street address, which creates a problem. There isn't enough Peachtree Street to go around. The Atlanta solution: make more peach trees.
Southern belles used to dance on this road to romance. Now they're gone with the wind like Vivian Leigh. That's Lee. Give those Falcons a new black suit. And give Rankin Smith a boot. But please, please, I beg on my knees, don't monkey with old Peachtree.
All this street renaming has reached the point that real historical significance is being sacrificed to myth. For example, Peachtree Center Avenue used to be called Ivy Street, named after Hardy Ivy, the first settler to bust sod in what is now downtown Atlanta. But more has been lost in street names, much more. The new downtown was built over the old. On the site of the Kimball House Hotel stands a parking deck. The Piedmont Hotel came down to make room for the Equitable Building. As for the old Equitable Building, 3 of its columns stand incongruously in front of the current occupant of its address, Trust Company Bank. The venerated Henry Grady Hotel was sacrificed for the erection of the quintessential 1970s hotel, the Peachtree Plaza. Only with the threatened demolition of the Fox Theater in the 1970s did a viable historic preservation effort emerge in Atlanta and help forge a plan to balance future growth with the survival of the city's landmark buildings.
The Fox was Atlanta's first major and only extremely large preservation project we've ever had. It shows the feasibility of it from a financial point of view. I think it also shows the worthiness of preservation from a spiritual point of view. That having a landmark of that nature that helps people remember their lives and helps young people know what the past was like has indeed a spiritual value. However, at the time that we started with the campaign to save the Fox in the mid-1970s, Atlanta had never, up to that point, had a project to save anything architectural of any significance. It was a new idea in Atlanta at the time.
The business folks, and me included, were really slow to come to recognize that we did have some things worth preserving. I think we've seen now, as a result of coming together in the last few years with the city preservation ordinance, which we hammered out, and a lot of blood flowed, but we hammered it out in good faith. And now we have things like the Hurt building and the Counter building and other things that now have been preserved that if we could look back and said, if they had gone the way of the Terminal Station, the Union Station, the old Atlanta building, a lot of other buildings, we would be crying probably now.
There's just not a vision, I think, of trying to preserve and upgrade human scale development. That's something that we really just do not have. And I don't see any indication that that's going to change anytime in the very near future.
It's fitting that somewhere under the asphalt of one of these downtown parking lots lies the unmarked grave of Hardy Ivy. I suspect he's rolling over in it.
Clearly, downtown Atlanta is reluctant to draw upon its past to shape its future. But what of that future?
Well, the three elements that of course, it's got to be a workplace. Primarily it is a workplace, but if you're going to have a healthy, vibrant, 24-hour city that people feel a part of, it's got to be more than a 9-to-5 office location. You have to be able to have people live in a downtown and to play in a downtown. There have to be things to do that will cause people to want to be a part, sort of the total life that you expect to have in a community. I don't think it's a question. We've had the workplace. We have lagged with regard to living and playing because of the dynamics of the development of the suburbs. We have been working to try to bring that back to life. It's very difficult. Underground Atlanta is probably our most notable example of that, where we spent a lot of money, a lot of time and effort to, in effect, build a town center, rebuild a town center that hard. And it's paying off. We are slowly but surely getting housing, moving into the central city. The most dramatic example that we've worked on for years is the whole area of Bedford Pine, where we now have close to 1,500 units that we've developed over the years of all levels of housing. I was committed to be the first one, my wife and I, to move in, and we've now lived over there for almost 11 years. And we have a lot of neighbors now that live there.
Well, my wife and I love it because it's so convenient. It's even more convenient for me because I'm only 5 minutes from Underground, where I perform regularly, and I'm very happy about that too. But we're also close to the shopping centers and the libraries and just everything we could need. And it gives me a lot of time to be here in my studio, which I love to be, and work on tunes, some of which I've written. One I'm writing, would you like to hear a little bit of it? Let me just put this down here and play this for you. When I was a kid, I asked my dad one time for $50 to go on a date. He said, $40, what do you need with $20? So I wrote him a song 30, 40 years later. Well, you can't take it with you, sure you can try. Enjoy what you have and kiss it goodbye. If everything turns on the turn of the card, and your stakes are too high, try mowing your yard. All of your money will end up a curse, 'cause you never saw an armored car behind a hearse.
Today, Underground Atlanta shows that downtown can be a place for entertainment and shopping, not just for work and sporting events. Underground also serves to bring Atlantans together without regard to race, another sign of a maturing, modern Atlanta. The Central Business District has expanded northward into Midtown. There, the new office building architecture shuns the Portman-esque glass tower in favor of styles that harken back to the grandeur of those turn-of-the-century skyscrapers. Peachtree Street's concentration of office towers and hotels has given it a new vitality. Our challenge in the future is to find ways of revitalizing other areas of the old downtown, to blend the old and the new in ways that make sense, to make preservation the friend, not the foe, of prosperity.
Auburn Avenue remains the challenge. The Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Site anchors its eastern end and serves as a tourist magnet. The challenge is the vacant buildings at the other end of Sweet Auburn. The heart of historic Atlanta has been given new life. Will the same hold true for its black soul?
Major funding for this program has been provided by the Letty Pate Evans Foundation and by the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Georgia Humanities Council. Additional funding was provided by the David, Helen, and Marion Woodward Fund, a Wachovia Bank-managed foundation, by Atlanta Gas Light Company, Georgia's largest energy distributor and Atlanta's oldest corporate citizen, and by the American Express Philanthropic Fund.